What happens when a woman, grieving and alone, walks into the most exclusive restaurant in the city? She's just trying to honor a memory, but she's unaware that the restaurant, and everyone in it, belongs to him. The man watching from the shadows, the man they call the wolf. He sees her. He sees her defiance, her sorrow, and her fire, and with 4 simple words, he changes her life forever. Bring her to me. This is the story of how a harmless lamb walked into the wolf's den and walked out the queen. The crystal goblet felt cold and heavy in Amelia Hayes's hand. It was a misplaced weight, much like she was a misplaced person. Il Corvo d'Oro wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of quiet wealth, a museum of power. The air smelled of aged wine, truffle oil, and old money. Patrons spoke in hushed, confident tones, their jewelry catching the soft, amber light like captured stars. And then there was Amelia. She sat alone at a small table in the corner, a table the maitre d' had given her with visible reluctance. Her dress was simple black, elegant but clearly off the rack. It was the one nice thing she owned, saved for funerals, and this pilgrimage. This was her father's favorite restaurant, the one he always talked about, the one he promised to take her to when the big account clears. He was Thomas Hayes, a quiet accountant, a man of ledgers and numbers. And now, a year to the day of his death, she was here. She had saved for 6 months to afford a single plate of risotto and 1 glass of Barolo. She was acutely aware of the stares. The women in their silks looked through her. The men in their bespoke suits dismissed her. She was an anomaly, a glitch in their opulent matrix. She clutched the small, worn leather journal on her lap, her father's last remaining possession, and tried to shrink. She failed. In a raised alcove, shrouded by velvet curtains and a screen of smoked glass, Nico Volpe watched. He didn't just own Il Corvo d'Oro. He owned the building it was in, the block it sat on, and the political will of the district that allowed it to operate. To the public, he was a legitimate hospitality magnate. To the underworld, he was Il Lupo, the wolf, the capo of the Volpe family, a name that carried the weight of centuries, unlike the brutish new money Carbones he was currently at war with. "She doesn't belong," said Marco Bianchi, his consigliere, his gaze following Nico's. Marco was a man of quiet details. "Her dress is from a department store. The shoes are worn. She's normal." "Normal?" Nico leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. The light caught the silver in his dark hair and the heavy gold ring on his pinky. "Normal doesn't walk in here, Marco. Normal doesn't sit alone, order $100 glass of wine she can't afford, and stare down every person who looks at her." He watched her lift her chin. There was no fear in her eyes, just a deep, profound sadness mixed with a defiant fire. She was beautiful, yes, in a way that was raw and unpolished. But it was the defiance that held him. In his world, women were either trophies or property. This one looked like a queen in exile. "She's clutching a book," Nico mused, his voice a low rumble. "A diary, perhaps," Marco offered. "No, it's a ledger. Look at the way her thumb traces the spine. It's a reflex, a practical motion." Nico watched her for another 5 minutes. He watched the way the waiter hovered, the way the maitre d' kept glancing over, panicked, as if her very presence might tarnish the restaurant's reputation. He watched her take a small, deliberate sip of her wine, her eyes closing for just a second, as if committing a memory to heart. She was honoring someone. A sudden, fierce possessiveness seized him. He didn't know who she was. He didn't care. He only knew that she was the only real thing in a room full of fakes. And she was in his house, He finished his espresso, placing the tiny cup back on the saucer with a soft click that silenced the table. "Marco," he said, his eyes never leaving the girl. "Boss?" The girl in the corner. The one in black. Marco instinctively reached for his wallet. "You want me to pay her bill? Have her removed?" Nico turned his gaze to his consigliere, and Marco felt a familiar chill. It was the look that preceded an order that was not to be questioned. "No," Nico Volpi said. "Bring her to me." Amelia sensed the shift in the room before she saw it. The low hum of conversation didn't just quiet, it was sucked from the air. The clinking of silverware stopped. She felt a shadow fall over her table and looked up. A man in a perfectly tailored suit stood beside her. He was older, with watchful eyes and an impassive face. He looked like he could be a CEO or a senator's aide, but the stillness in his posture, the way his hands were clasped loosely in front of him, suggested something else, something more disciplined. "Signorina Hayes?" he asked. His voice was polite, but it was not a question. Amelia's blood went cold. He knew her name. She had only given it to the maître d'hôte. "Yes. My name is Marco Bianchi. My employer, Mr. Volpi, requests your presence at his table." Amelia's eyes darted past him to the raised alcove. She could only see silhouettes behind the smoked glass. I'm afraid you have the wrong person. I don't know any Mr. Volpi." "He owns Il Corvo d'Oro," Marco said, as if that explained everything. "Please tell him I'm flattered, but I'm just finishing my wine." She tried to sound polite, but her voice trembled. She just wanted to be left alone. Marco's smile was a thin, bloodless line. It didn't touch his eyes. "Signorina, with respect, that was not a request." The threat was unspoken, but absolute. Every patron was now watching, not with curiosity, but with a practiced, fearful indifference. They knew who Marco was, and they knew who he worked for. Amelia was suddenly, terribly, out of her depth. This wasn't just a rich man asking her for a drink. This was a command. I can't pay for my meal yet," she whispered, a flush of humiliation rising. "I was waiting for—" "That is not a concern," Marco said, his voice softening just a fraction. He pulled out her chair. "Please, do not make this difficult." Her legs felt like lead. She clutched her father's journal to her chest as she stood. The walk across the dining room was the longest of her life. It was a walk of shame, a parade of one. She could feel the stares like physical blows. Marco led her to the alcove and pulled back the heavy velvet curtain. The man inside was alone. He sat in a high-backed leather booth, a halo of lamplight catching the sharp lines of his face. He wasn't classically handsome in the way movie stars were. His features were too harsh, his nose aquiline, his mouth firm. But his presence was overwhelming. He radiated a dark, coiled energy, a stillness that was more intimidating than any movement. His eyes, a deep, startling blue, pinned her in place. "Leave us, Marco," he said. The curtain swished shut, plunging the alcove into an intimate, terrifying silence. The noise of the restaurant was gone, replaced by the pounding of her own heart. He motioned to the seat opposite him. "Please, sit." Amelia sat on the edge of the cushion. "Wine?" he offered, gesturing to an open bottle of wine so dark it looked black. I have one, thank you." "You have a Barolo, a 2016. A good choice," he said. "But this is a 97 Omarone. It's better." He poured a glass and slid it across the table. It wasn't a suggestion. She wrapped her hands around the glass, but didn't drink. "You've made quite an impression on my staff, Signorina Hayes," he began, his voice a low, gravelly baritone with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. They are confused. They believe you are lost. I'm not lost, Amelia said, finding a sliver of her anger. I'm just here. Are you? He smiled, but it was like his consiglieres, all technique, no warmth. You are here on a Tuesday night, alone, in a restaurant you cannot afford. You are not eating. You are drinking one glass of very expensive wine, very slowly, and you are clutching at that book as if it's a life raft. So I will ask again, why are you here? I'm here to honor my father. It's the anniversary of his death. This was his favorite place. Her voice was sharp, defensive. Nico Volpi leaned back, studying her. The mask of polite inquiry dropped, replaced by a sudden, intense focus. He stilled, as if a predator catching a familiar scent. Your father, he said, the word slow and deliberate. What was his name? Thomas Hayes. He was an accountant. You wouldn't know him. Nico's sharp gaze dropped to the journal in her lap. Thomas Hayes, the accountant. He said the word accountant as if it were a code. He had brown hair, wore wire-rimmed glasses, always had a stain on his tie. Amelia's world tilted. How did you know that? He was a good man, Nico said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. A little weak, perhaps, but precise. He worked for my father, Angelo Volpi, for nearly a decade. Amelia stared, uncomprehending. Her father, a quiet, suburban man who did taxes for dentists? No, she said. No, he worked for a small firm, Miller and Clark. That was his cover, Nico said, waving a hand dismissively. Your father, Signorina Hayes, was the finest accountant in the city. He didn't just balance books, he made them. He leaned forward, the intensity in his blue eyes hypnotic. He worked for us. And then, like a fool, he thought he could find a better offer. He went to work for Lorenzo Carbone. Amelia knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name. Carbone. The word was synonymous with drugs, violence, and fear. My father died in a gas leak, she said, her voice shaking. It was an accident. Nico Volpi's expression was one of profound, almost gentle pity. It was more terrifying than his anger. There was no gas leak, cara mia, he said softly. Your father got greedy, or maybe he got scared. He started skimming from Carbone. And when Lorenzo Carbone finds a rat in his house, he doesn't call an exterminator. He burns the house down. Amelia's breath hitched. The air in the alcove was too thick, too warm. No, you're lying. My father was a good man. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a criminal, Nico agreed, his voice dangerously smooth. He was a professional. There's a difference. He laundered money for the most powerful men in this city. He made fortunes appear and disappear. He was a magician, and magicians, if they're not careful, get found out. The world Amelia had constructed around her father's memory, a world of quiet integrity, boring spreadsheets, and promises of a better future, was disintegrating. The gas leak. It had never made sense. The fire was too intense. The investigation closed too quickly. At the time, she was too consumed by grief to question it. Now this man's words were slotting into place with the sickening click of a puzzle piece. Why are you telling me this? She whispered, her hands shaking so badly she had to put the wine glass down. Nico's gaze dropped to the leather journal she was clutching. What is that? It's his, she said, pulling it closer. It's just his work ledger, old clients, numbers. It doesn't mean anything, doesn't it? Nico's eyes narrowed. Your father was meticulous. He was also paranoid. He didn't trust computers. He kept a second set of books, a hard copy, he called it, an insurance policy. He held out his hand. "Let me see it." "No." The word was out before she could stop it, sharp and instinctive. Nico didn't flinch. He slowly retracted his hand. "Lorenzo Carbone has spent the last year searching for that book. He tore apart your father's house. He bribed the police who handled the accident. He couldn't find it. He assumed it burned with your father." He paused, letting the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating. "But then," Nico continued, "a few weeks ago, his men heard a rumor. A broker was quietly trying to sell a small suburban house. The owner, Amelia Hayes." Carbone realized his mistake. "Your father didn't keep his insurance policy. He gave it to his daughter." Amelia's blood turned to ice. He's looking for me?" "He was," Nico corrected. "Until tonight, he didn't know where you were. You were just a name. But tonight, you walked into the brightest spotlight in the entire city. You walked into my restaurant, and my maître d', unfortunately, is on Carbone's payroll." Amelia's stomach dropped. "What?" That means, Nico said, pulling out his phone, "that by the time you finished your first sip of wine, Lorenzo Carbone knew your name, your face, and exactly where you were sitting." He typed a quick message and put the phone down. "He will have men outside. They will be waiting for you to leave." Amelia shot up from the booth, panic erasing every other thought. "I have to go. I have to call the police." "Sit down." His voice was a whip crack. It wasn't loud, but it slammed her back into the seat. "The police? Who do you think Carbone bribes? Who do you think buried the investigation into your father's accident?" He leaned in, his face just inches from hers. The scent of him, expensive cologne, wine and something else, something metallic and dangerous, filled her senses. "You have two options, Signorina Hayes," he said. "You can walk out that door. You will not make it to the street corner. Carbone's men will take you. They will take that book. And when they have it, you will disappear. Just like your father." "And the second option?" she whispered, her throat raw. "The second option," he said, his blue eyes holding her captive, "is you stay with me. You give me that book. I use it to destroy my rival, and in return, I keep you alive." You want to use me," she said, the realization dawning. "You didn't bring me here to warn me. You brought me here to take this." She held up the journal. "At first," Nico admitted, "I was just curious. You were compelling. But when you said your father's name, everything changed. You are no longer just a girl in a restaurant. You are the single most valuable asset in this city. You are a weapon, and you are pointing right at my enemy's heart." "So I'm a prisoner," she said bitterly. "You are a guest," he corrected, though the word held no comfort. "Carbone makes you a victim. I am offering to make you a partner. But make no mistake, from the moment you said Thomas Hayes, you were never walking out of this restaurant alone." He pressed a small, concealed button under the table. "Marco will be here in a moment. We are leaving." "Where?" "My home. It's the only place in this city Carbone can't touch you." He took a sip of his wine, his gaze analytical, cold. "You should drink the Amarone. It's a long night. And your old life, Amelia, it's over." The private elevator was silent, ascending with a smooth, oiled hum that did nothing to calm Amelia's nerves. It opened not into a hallway, but directly into Nico Volpi's penthouse. If the restaurant below was a fortress of wealth, this was its command center. The room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a 360-degree view of the city. The lights below glittered like a carpet of diamonds. The furniture was modern, stark, and brutally expensive. It wasn't a home. It was a statement of power. "Marco will arrange for your things to be collected from your house," Nico said, walking to a massive bar carved from a single block of black marble. He loosened his tie. "You will not be returning there." Just like that. Amelia's voice was sharp, brittle. She was still clutching the journal. "You summon me to your table, tell me my father was a mob accountant, and then kidnap me? And you expect me to just go along?" "I expect you to be smart," Nico said, turning, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Your father was smart, until he wasn't. You are in danger. I am offering you safety. It is a simple transaction." "A transaction," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. "My life for a book." "Your life," he stressed, "for the information in that book. Information that can end a war. Information that can get you justice for your father's murder." That stopped her. "Justice?" "Lorenzo Carbone killed your father. He took him from you," Nico said, his voice softening, becoming persuasive. "And you, Mia Cara, are holding the weapon that can destroy him. But you can't pull the trigger alone. You need me." He walked toward her. He was taller than she'd realized, his presence filling the sterile, empty room. "I want Carbone gone. You want justice for your father. Our interests are aligned." "You're no better than he is," she spat. "You're both monsters. You're just angry my father switched sides." His eyes hardened. The brief warmth vanished, replaced by the Arctic chill of Il Lupo. "Do not compare me to him. My father, Angelo Volpi, took your father in. We gave him protection. We gave him a life he could only dream of. He was Famiglia, and he betrayed us. He went to a worm like Carbone, a man who deals in poison and human misery. My family deals in contracts, in order. We have honor. Carbone has none." "Honor?" she laughed, a hysterical broken sound. "You call this honor? Kidnapping me?" "I call this necessity," he said, his voice dropping. "I am at war, and you just brought me the enemy's battle plans." He took a step closer. "I am giving you a choice he would never give you. I am offering you a seat at the table. He would offer you a shallow grave." Amelia backed away until her back hit the cold glass of the window. The city lights swam dizzily behind her. She was trapped, 50 stories in the air. What if I refuse?" she whispered. "What if I burn the book?" Nico smiled. It was a predator's smile, all teeth. "Then you are of no use to me, and you are of no use to Carbone. You would be a loose end. I would let you walk out the front door. And Marco would call Carbone's men and tell them where you are." The threat was vile, absolute, and she knew, with chilling certainty, that he meant it. She was a pawn. Her only choice was which king to hide behind. She looked at him, at this powerful, ruthless man who had just dismantled her entire life in the span of 10 minutes. Then she looked down at the journal. Her father's handwriting, his meticulous, cramped numbers. He had been a liar, a criminal, but he was still her father, and he had been murdered. "Fine," she said, her voice shaking but gaining a new, hard edge. "Safety. For the book. But I don't just give it to you." Nico raised an eyebrow. "You said it yourself," Amelia said, holding the journal against her chest. "I have the weapon. You don't get it until I get what I want." "And what is that?" "I want to be there," she said, her eyes flashing. "When you take him down. I want to see the man who killed my father. I want to see him lose everything." Nico Volpi was silent for a long moment. He studied her, a new appreciation in his gaze. He had expected tears, pleading. He had not expected terms. "You have your father's precision," he said, "but you have a fire he never possessed. Very well, Amelia Hayes. You have a deal. He gestured to a long, white hallway. Marco has prepared a room for you. Get some rest. We have work to do. Amelia walked past him, her head held high. As she left, he called after her. Amelia. She stopped but didn't turn. Welcome to the family. Later that night, alone in a bedroom larger than her entire apartment, Amelia finally opened the journal. It was, as she'd always believed, filled with her father's numbers, columns of them, next to dates and initials. But as she looked closer, she realized it wasn't just accounting. It was code. Her father had taught her his shorthand when she was a girl, telling her it was a game. A for apple, he'd say, but B isn't for boy, it's for bank. Her fingers trembled as she deciphered a line. It wasn't just a transaction, it was a date, an offshore account number, a name, and a second set of initials. L.C. Lorenzo Carbone. And next to it, J.P.D. Judge Patrick Donnelly. Her father hadn't just been an accountant. He'd been a record keeper. He had documented every single bribe, every dirty cop, every corrupt politician. Nico Volpe thought he'd found a weapon. Amelia realized she wasn't holding a weapon. She was holding the bomb. The next 2 days were a blur of tense, suffocating luxury. Amelia was a prisoner in a palace. She had a wardrobe of clothes she'd never be able to afford, food prepared by a private chef, and 2 of Nico's guards, stone-faced men named Anthony and Leo, stationed outside her door. Nico, however, was gone. He left her to stew in her new reality, a calculated move to let the fear and isolation set in, to make her dependent on him. But Amelia didn't panic. She worked. For 48 hours, she did nothing but decipher her father's ledger. The game he'd taught her was a complex substitution cipher, mixed with accounting principles. She filled notebooks, cross-referencing, building a map of Lorenzo Carbone's entire criminal empire. It was worse than Nico knew. It wasn't just bribes. It was supply routes for his drug trade, names of front companies, and a detailed timeline of his takeover of the city's unions. And then, buried in the back pages, she found something else. Her father hadn't just been keeping records on Carbone. He had a whole section on the Volpe family. On Nico's father, Angelo. It detailed their weak spots, their political connections, their own skimming from shared enterprises. Her father hadn't just betrayed the Volpes for the Carbonis. He had been playing both sides, intending to use his ledger to blackmail everyone and escape. Amelia's hands went cold. Nico didn't just want this book to destroy Carbone. He needed this book to make sure his own family's secrets stayed buried. This changed everything. He hadn't been offering her a partnership. He had been containing a threat. She was the threat. When Nico finally returned on the 3rd night, he found her not in her room, but in his study, waiting for him. She had a pot of coffee brewed and 2 cups poured. The journal was on the desk between them. He stopped in the doorway, his tailored suit rumpled, a new tension in his shoulders. He looked surprised to see her there, waiting for him like an equal. "You look tired," she said. "Carbone is agitated," Nico said, shrugging off his jacket. "He's torn your house apart. He knows you're gone. He suspects I have you." "Good," Amelia said. "He should be." Nico looked at the notebooks stacked on his desk. "You've been busy?" "My father was very thorough," she said, her voice flat. "He left me everything, including your family's accounts, Nico." The mask slipped. For 1 second, she saw the wolf, a flash of pure, cold fury in his eyes. He'd been outmaneuvered by a ghost and by the girl he'd underestimated. He slowly sat down opposite her. "What do you want, Amelia?" "The same thing I wanted before," she said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the desk. "Justice. But the terms have changed. We are no longer capo and guest. We are partners, 50-50. You don't get this book. She tapped the journal. You don't get any of it, unless I get my terms. And those are? First, you will use your resources to quietly move every cent from those Carbone accounts. She pointed to a list of numbers, to a new set of accounts in my name. We bleed him dry before he even knows he's cut. Nico's lips quirked. You are your father's daughter. Second, she continued, I don't just want Carbone. I want the men who helped him, the ones who lit the match. Their names are in here. A judge, 2 police detectives, and one of his lieutenants. I want them to fall, too. And third, when this is over, the Volpe family secrets, they stay secret. In my head, and in my ledger. You get your empire back, free and clear of your rival. But I, she said, I become your new accountant, your only accountant. You'll never have to worry about a disloyal employee again. Because I'll own half the bank. Nako stared at her, the silence stretching. She saw a war behind his eyes, his pride battling his pragmatism. He was a king, and she, a commoner, was demanding half his kingdom. Finally, he laughed. It was a short, harsh sound, but it was genuine. Madone, he whispered, you're not a lamb, you're a lioness. He leaned forward, all pretense gone. Carbone won't just sit back and let us drain his accounts. He'll retaliate. This will start a war. He already started it, Amelia said, her voice like steel. He started it a year ago when he murdered my father. I'm just here to finish it. Nico's gaze was no longer cold. It was hot, filled with a new, dangerous admiration. He won't just come for me. He'll come for you. He'll want the book, and he'll want you dead. That's why we don't wait for him to come to us, Amelia said, sliding another piece of paper over. It was a single name and a routing number. What's this? That's Detective Michael Flynn. He was the lead investigator on my father's accident. According to this journal, he's been on Carbone's payroll for 10 years. That routing number is to his son's college fund, which Carbone has been paying. You want to expose him? Nico asked. No, I want to use him. We're going to make a small, anonymous donation to that account. A donation from a bank in the Cayman Islands that your family happens to control. We're going to leak the information about the donation, not to the press, but to Carbone's other dirty cops. We're going to make it look like Flynn is skimming, just like my father did. Nico saw it immediately. You're turning them against each other. Carbone will panic. He'll think Flynn has the ledger. He'll silence Flynn, Amelia said, her voice void of emotion. And in the chaos, while he's busy cleaning his own house, we drain his primary accounts. It's the first move. Nico stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the city. This is surgical. It's cold. It's what he deserves. He turned back to her, his blue eyes electric. You were made for this world, Amelia Hayes. You just didn't know it. He walked over to her, stopping so close she had to tilt her head back to look at him. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat radiating from him. This isn't a game, Amelia. Once we make this move, there is no going back. Blood will be spilled. It already has been, she said. Mine. He held her gaze, a silent contract passing between them. Then he reached out, not for the journal, but to gently brush a stray strand of hair from her face. His touch was light, but it seared her skin. Then let's go to war, partner. The plan worked faster than either of them had anticipated. Within 24 hours of the anonymous donation, Detective Flynn was found in his car, a victim of an apparent suicide. The city's underworld was buzzing. Carbone was cleaning house, and he was doing it messily. While Carbone was distracted by his own internal rot, Nico's people, guided by Amelia's information, executed a digital massacre. They siphoned millions from Carbone's offshore holdings, redirecting them through a dizzying maze of shell corporations that ultimately led to a new, secure vault in Switzerland, accessible only by Amelia. Nico was impressed. Amelia was numb. She had just indirectly caused a man's death, but the face she kept seeing wasn't Flynn's. It was her father's. This was justice, she told herself, just in a language she was only now learning to speak. But Carbone wasn't a fool. He was a wounded animal, and now he was cornered. He knew who was behind it. The digital footprints, though faint, all pointed back to Volpe, and he knew, with desperate certainty, that the only way Volpe could have this information was if he had the Hayes girl. The retaliation came not as a bullet, but as an olive branch, a poisoned one. A message was delivered to Il Corvo d'Oro, a simple white envelope. Inside, a card. "I have what's left of your father's things. A sign of goodwill. Let the girl come and retrieve them. Alone. Tomorrow night. The old shipyard. Let us end this before the city burns." "It's a trap," Nico said, tossing the card onto his desk. "He'll have a dozen snipers waiting." "I know," Amelia said. She was standing at the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. "I will not let you go." "I know," she said again. "That's why I'm not going to the shipyard." Nico frowned. "What do you mean?" Amelia turned. The simple, grieving girl from the restaurant was gone. In her place was a woman who had spent a week living with a monster and found she wasn't afraid. "He thinks I have my father's arrogance," she said. "He thinks I'm sentimental. He thinks I'm a pawn he can trade. He's wrong." She walked to the desk. "He wants the girl. He wants the ledger. So we'll give him what he wants, but not at the shipyard. We do it on our terms, on our territory." "Here?" Nico asked, understanding dawning. "In this building?" "No," Amelia said, a cold smile touching her lips. "Not in your fortress. In my world. We do it where it all started. We do it at Il Corvo d'Oro." The plan was audacious. It was insane, and Nico loved it. They would accept the meeting. Nico would send a decoy team to the shipyard, a loud, obvious convoy to draw the bulk of Carbone's forces. Meanwhile, Carbone would receive a secondary, panicked message, seemingly from the maitre d' he had on his payroll, who was now sitting in Nico's basement. The message would say that Nico was smuggling Amelia out of the city tonight, and that they were moving her via the restaurant's private cellars. It was the perfect lure. Carbone, believing Nico was distracted by the shipyard, would see a golden opportunity to bypass the penthouse security and seize Amelia directly. He would bring a small, elite team. He would be walking right into the wolf's den. The night of the meeting, Il Corvo d'Oro was closed for a private event. The tables were still set, the crystal gleaming, but the patrons were all Nico's men, armed and waiting. Amelia sat, not in Nico's alcove, but at the very same table in the corner where he had first seen her. She was the bait. She wore a red dress, a stark contrast to the black she'd worn before. She was no longer in mourning. She was at war. Nico stood in the shadows of the alcove, watching her. He had a dozen men in the kitchen, 2 on the roof, and Marco by the main door. "You're sure about this?" he'd asked her, just before they went down. She'd looked at him, her gaze steady. "He took my father. I'm going to take everything from him." He found himself mesmerized by her. This creation. This woman of iron and ice. The attraction he'd felt that first night, a simple, possessive intrigue, had morphed into something far more dangerous. It was respect. It was a dark, profound understanding. He'd found the only other person in the world who spoke his language. "When this is over, Amelia," he said, his voice low. "When this is over," she interrupted, "we'll talk business, Nico. Nothing else." But her eyes betrayed her. There was a spark, a shared energy that had nothing to do with ledgers or revenge. It was the thrill of the hunt, and they were hunting together. "Red is your color," he said, just before he stepped into the shadows. Amelia sat at the table, the restaurant silent around her. She clutched the journal, the copy she had made, in her lap. The real one was taped to her back, under the red dress. She waited. The silence was absolute. And then, from the kitchen, came the sound of a single, silenced thwip and the heavy thud of a body. The trap was sprung. The silence of the restaurant didn't just break, it shattered. A muffled shout came from the kitchen, followed by a rapid, metallic clang, one of Nico's men dropping his weapon. Carbone hadn't just sent a team through the kitchen, he'd sent his best. "Now, Marco!" Nico roared from the alcove. The lights in the dining room clicked off, plunging the room into near blackness, lit only by the emergency exit signs and the city lights outside. The patrons at the tables, all Volpe men, were instantly on their feet, weapons drawn, taking cover behind overturned tables. Muzzle flashes erupted from the kitchen doorway. Carbone's men, using night vision, were spraying the room. Glass and crystal exploded. "Amelia! Cellar! Go!" Nico bellowed, firing 2 rounds from his own pistol toward the kitchen. Amelia didn't hesitate. As planned, she bolted from her table, heading for a concealed door in the wall that led down to the wine cellar. One of Carbone's men saw the flash of her red dress and took aim. "No!" Nico lunged from the alcove, tackling the gunman just as he fired. The shot went wide, shattering a priceless vase. The main dining room erupted into a full-scale firefight. It was chaos, screams, and the percussive thump of gunfire echoing off the marble floors. Amelia scrambled through the concealed door and slammed it shut, fumbling for the lock. She raced down the narrow stone steps, the air turning cool and damp. The wine cellar was vast, a labyrinth of oak barrels and dusty racks. She ran to the back, to the small, reinforced, private collection room, where Marco was supposed to be waiting to secure her. She rounded the corner and slammed to a halt. Marco was on the ground, a pool of dark blood spreading from his chest. Standing over him, a smoking pistol in his hand, was Lorenzo Carbone. He was an older man, with a shock of white hair and the dead reptilian eyes of a shark. He hadn't come through the kitchen. He'd come up through the sub-tunnels, anticipating Nico's every move. "You have your father's eyes," Carbone said, his voice a dry rasp. "And his arrogance, thinking you could trap me." He kicked Marco's body aside, disgust on his face. "Did you really think a few deleted numbers would stop me, child? I built this city." "You murdered my father," Amelia whispered, her back against a wine rack. She was trapped. "Your father was a thief," Carbone roared, his composure cracking. "He stole from me. He stole from all of us. And he was a fool to leave his only weakness behind." He gestured to her. "You." He took a step toward her. "Give me the book." It's at the penthouse," she lied, her voice trembling. Carbone smiled, a terrible, thin-lipped expression. "You are a bad liar, just like him." He raised his pistol. "I will not ask again." "Drop it, Lorenzo!" Nico's voice echoed from the stairwell. He stood there, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his suit torn, his pistol rock-steady in his hand. Carbone laughed. "The wolf? Come to save your little pet. You've gone soft, Nico. Your father would be ashamed." "My father," Nico said, advancing slowly into the cellar, "taught me to take out the trash, and you, Lorenzo, are long overdue. You first. Carbone swiveled, firing at Nico. Nico dove behind a row of massive barrels. The bullet sparked off the stone wall. Carbone turned his gun back to Amelia. This ends now. Give me the book, or he dies. He's lying, Amelia, Nico yelled from cover. He'll kill us both. The book! Carbone screamed, pressing the hot muzzle of the gun against Amelia's temple. Amelia was crying, trembling. Okay, just don't shoot. She reached into her dress, her fingers fumbling with the copied journal. It's here. Take it. She threw the leather-bound book onto the stone floor. It slid to a stop near Carbone's feet. Greed won. For one split second, Carbone's eyes left Amelia and darted down to the prize he had been hunting for a year. His gun lowered just an inch as he bent to retrieve it. It was the only opening they would get. Nico exploded from behind the barrels, a primal roar tearing from his throat. He wasn't aiming to shoot, he was aiming to close the distance. He slammed into Carbone like a freight train, sending both of them crashing into a rack of priceless wine. Bottles shattered, spraying the room with the dark red stain of Cabernet. The gun clattered across the floor. It was no longer a gunfight. It was a brawl. Nico, younger and stronger, landed a brutal punch to Carbone's face. But Carbone was a street fighter. He grabbed a broken bottleneck, slashing upwards. Nico cried out, stumbling back, clutching his side. A dark, blossoming stain appeared on his white shirt. Carbone, his face a mask of blood and fury, scrambled for the fallen pistol. Amelia saw it all in slow motion. Nico, bleeding, the gun on the floor. Carbone lunging. She wasn't a pawn, she wasn't a victim. She was her father's daughter. She was vengeance. While Carbone's eyes were on the gun, Amelia grabbed the nearest thing she could find. A heavy, metal corkscrew, the waiter's friend, lying on a tasting table. Carbone's fingers closed around the pistol's grip. He turned, a triumphant snarl on his face, ready to end Nico. Amelia lunged, screaming a year's worth of rage and grief. She drove the corkscrew's sharp, spiraling point with all her strength into the side of Carbone's neck. It was a mortal, grisly blow. Carbone froze. His eyes widened in disbelief. A wet, gurgling sound escaped his throat. He dropped the gun. He reached for his neck, his fingers touching the metal embedded there. He looked at Amelia, his expression not of anger, but of simple surprise. Then he collapsed, twitching, onto the stone floor. Dead. Silence. The only sound in the cellar was the drip, drip, drip of wine from the broken bottles and the ragged, shallow breathing of Nico Volpe. Amelia stood frozen, her hand still outstretched. The heavy corkscrew was gone, still embedded in Carbone. Her hand was covered in blood. His blood. She hadn't just caused a death, she had taken a life. A wave of nausea and shock so profound it buckled her knees. She fell back against the wall, sliding down to the floor, her red dress hiking up, her breathing coming in choked, hysterical sobs. Amelia. Nico's voice was a strained gasp. He was clutching his side, his face pale, but he was alive. He was staring at her, and his expression was one she had never seen before. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't lust. It was awe. An awe that was deeply, deeply unsettled. Amelia, he said again, pushing himself up. He kicked Carbone's gun away, then stumbled over to the consigliere. He checked Marco's pulse. He's gone. Nico leaned his head back against the stone, his eyes closing for a moment in a spasm of pain and, perhaps, genuine grief. When he opened them, they were focused only on her. You saved my life, he panted. Amelia just shook her head, still sobbing. He killed my father. She couldn't form the words. Shh, Nico said. He pushed himself off the wall and limped toward her, ignoring his own wound. He knelt in front of her, his knees cracking on the stone. He was still the capo, still the wolf, but he was also bleeding, human. He reached out, his hand shaking, and gently, firmly, took her face in his hands. His palms were rough against her tear-soaked cheeks. "You did it, Amelia," he whispered, his voice raw. "It's over. You're safe." "He's dead," she choked out. "I killed him." "He was a dead man the second he touched you," Nico said with a dark finality. "He just didn't know it." He used his thumbs to wipe her tears, smearing the blood on her face. "You did what you had to do. You did what I couldn't do." The sound of footsteps thundered down the stairs. Anthony and Leo, Nico's guards, burst in, guns raised. They took in the scene. Marco, dead. Carbone, dead. Their boss, bleeding. And the girl, covered in blood, staring blankly. "Boss," Anthony said, rushing to Nico's side. "Are you hit?" "It's a scratch," Nico grunted, waving him off. "Get me a doctor. And get this." He kicked Carbone's body. "Out of my restaurant. Send a message to what's left of his organization. The wolf is the only... Gah." He clutched his side, a real wave of pain hitting him. "And her," Anthony said, looking at Amelia with new, wary eyes. "What about her?" Amelia's sobs quieted. She looked up. Her eyes were no longer wild with panic. They were empty. Cold. She's with me," Nico said. But there was a new hesitation in his voice. The power dynamic had been completely rewritten. Amelia finally focused. Her gaze traveled from Nico's worried face to the guards, to the body of Lorenzo Carbone. Then she looked at the fake journal lying on the floor. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself to her feet. She was unsteady. She reached behind her back, under the red dress. The guards tensed. She pulled out the real journal, the one with her father's true, damning legacy. She held it in her hand. It was her leverage, her inheritance, her prison. Nico watched her. He knew, in that moment, what she held. He knew that his family's secrets were in that book. He had just watched her kill a man with a corkscrew. He was wounded, and she was, for the first time, completely and totally in control. "Anthony," she said, her voice a low, chilling rasp that barely sounded like her own. "Get him to the doctor." The guard looked at Nico, confused. "You heard her," Nico breathed, a strange, dark smile playing on his lips. "Do as she says." Amelia didn't hand Nico the book. She clutched it to her chest. She looked at the blood on her hands, then at the dead man on the floor. The girl who had walked into Il Corvodoro to mourn her father was gone. "Clean this up," she said to the guards, her voice devoid of emotion. "All of it. This is a 5-star establishment." She walked past Nico, past her kill, past the dead consigliere, and up the stairs, leaving the carnage behind. She didn't look back. Nico Volpi watched her go, a slow, painful, and deeply appreciative smile spreading across his face. He had brought a girl to his table to use as a pawn. He had, instead, just crowned a queen. And he wasn't sure if he should be terrified, or if he was already completely, irrevocably, in love. 1 month later, the city was quiet. The Carbone family had fractured, its lieutenants absorbed or eliminated by the Volpi organization. The Volpi family, in turn, had undergone its own silent restructuring. Nico was firmly in control, but he was no longer the only one at the top. Amelia did not live in the penthouse. She had her own apartment, a sleek, modern condo in a different, discreet building, purchased with the consulting fee she had paid herself from Carbone's siphoned accounts. She sat at a small outdoor cafe, a place of no significance, neutral ground. She was stirring a macchiato when Nico sat down opposite her. He looked restored. His suit was perfect, his hair impeccable. The wound in his side had healed, leaving a scar he would always carry. He placed a small, velvet box on the table. "A gift," he said. Amelia looked at it, but didn't open it. "I don't accept gifts, Nico. I negotiate." He smiled. "Then consider it a signing bonus." He opened it himself. Inside wasn't a ring or a necklace. It was a key. To the restaurant. The real key. The one the owner holds. Amelia raised an eyebrow. "You're giving me Il Corvo d'Oro?" "I'm returning it," he said. "Your father, for all his faults, loved that place. He always dreamed of buying it. Now, his daughter owns it." Amelia was silent. It was a gesture of immense trust, a multi-million-dollar peace offering. "And in return?" she asked. "In return," Nico said, "you come to work. Your name is already on the door of an office downtown. Hayes and Volpe Financial Services. It's discreet." "My father's ledger?" "Is your business," Nico said. "I trust you will keep the Volpe family accounts secure, as my new and very, very well-paid partner." This was it. The new world. She had her justice. She had her revenge. And now she had a purpose. She was the ghost in the machine, the woman with the kill switch on the entire city's underworld. She took the key and dropped it into her purse. "I accept." "Good," he said, signaling for an espresso. The easy, powerful confidence was back, but his eyes, when they looked at her, were different. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by a heat that still unsettled her. "There is one other thing," he said, his voice lowering. "Oh?" "My sister is getting married next month, in Sicily. It is a significant family event. All our allies will be there. It would be unseemly for the new head of the Volpe family to arrive alone." Amelia's heart, which she thought had turned to stone, gave a strange, unfamiliar flutter. "Are you asking me for a +1, Nico?" "I'm asking my partner," he said, his blue eyes intense. "To accompany me. To stand with me. To show the old world, the new face of our organization." He was offering her everything. Not just safety, not just power, but his world. He was bringing her home. Amelia looked at this man, this killer, this king, this wolf who had seen her at her weakest, and now respected her at her strongest. He had brought her to his table because he saw something he wanted. Now, he was asking her to sit at the head of it with him. She gave him a small, slow smile, the first real smile he'd ever seen on her face. It was devastating. "I'll have to check my schedule, Mr. Volpe," she said. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His touch was electric, a promise of danger and devotion. "I'm sure," he said. "You can find the time, Miss Hayes." The girl in the corner was gone. The Queen had taken her seat. And that's the story of Amelia and Nico. Did you see that final twist coming? She didn't just get revenge. She took the entire kingdom. What started with 4 words, "Bring her to me," ended with her owning the man who said them. If you loved this story of dark romance, karma, and a reversal of fortune, please let me know in the comments. I read every single one. What was your favorite part? Was it the confrontation in the cellar? Or that final power move at the cafe? Don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good Mafia drama, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. We post new, long-form stories just like this every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next in the world of shadows and secrets. Thanks for listening.